Hi, this is Michael Nicoloff. Thank you for joining me today for this brief talk. The ever-increasing push to be data-driven, coupled with the rapid expansion of data collection and analysis tools, has had an interesting result. Small organizations with a glut of data, but no clear plan about what to use it for. Libraries and librarians are no exception. Plenty of us have found ourselves amassing instructional, collection-based, reference, and other data, recognizing the value it has in it, but not being sure about the next step to take. We want to analyze our data so that we can assess ourselves and our students, but we lack a why that directs us how to do so, and that why is so important when it comes to finding our way through the data and using it to improve instruction. In this talk, I want to suggest a structured and relatively easy method for focusing our attention and finding that why, which can in turn help us focus our data assessment and use it to our advantage in instructional improvement. The idea I'm discussing here comes from lesson study. Lesson study is a form of collaborative professional development that originated in Japan and has gradually migrated to other parts of the world. It's characterized by a four-phase inquiry cycle in which a small team of educators, 1, study background materials related to teaching the subject matter they're focusing on, 2, plan a lesson that uses those materials in a way that engages students and makes students' thinking visible. 3, have one educator teach that lesson while team members and other educators observe student thinking in action during the lesson. And 4, reflect as a team on what worked, what didn't, and what can be gleaned from the process about instruction. While teams can theoretically repeat the inquiry process with revised or improved versions of the same lesson as many times as they want, the goal here is less to create the perfect lesson and more to uncover the knowledge, instincts, and methods that go into good lesson planning and teaching. Lesson study is still ripe for exploration in LIS, but I want to zero in on one aspect from the study phase that can be particularly useful in focusing assessment, and that's the creation of a research theme. So what's a research theme? A research theme is similar to a mission statement, but it's one that is actually operationalized so that it can do a better job of guiding instruction. It's developed through a straightforward but learning-rich process. This is frequently done in small groups, but it can also scale up to the level of an entire institution, so it can be done library-wide or even school-wide. First, a group of educators begin with a question. What qualities do we want our students to have when they graduate from our school? This is often done through individual reflection and then sharing out as a whole group. And then second, educators ask themselves, what are the current qualities of our students? The responses educators give here can be anecdotal or from other data sources, and often this can provoke educators to say, hey, we need more data about where students are at. The third step is to compare the responses to the two questions and then ask a third question. What are the gaps we need to bridge to get our students from point A to point B, and which gaps do we want to focus on? A statement is then formulated that positively states the qualities that you want to work to develop in your students. That statement is your research theme. Put concretely, if we say our goal is to have students approach sources found in research and daily life with a nuanced critical perspective, and we find currently that students approach sources with rigid, good or bad, checklist-centered perspective, then maybe we can decide to have our research theme be, our students will develop skills in thinking critically and flexibly about the credibility, relevance, and authority of sources. At this point, this sounds an awful lot like the mission statements or learning outcomes we put in our yearly reports or lesson plans. We often have a love-hate relationship with these because, yes, they provide big-picture guidance about our goals, but they rarely capture the nuances of our day-to-day work and therefore can end up feeling more and more remote. What's our way around that? What lesson study does is take things one step further by asking us not only to state our goals, but to consider how we're going to get there. This part of the research theme is called the theme's theory of action. This gets into the specifics, and it will inevitably evolve as you work, because it's just that, a theory, a hypothesis, a stab at what might work. Returning to our example, we all know that there are a ton of ways that students might learn to critically and flexibly about sources, but this asks you, the instructional librarian, to consider the methods for doing that and then come up with a plan on how to put those methods in action. So your theory of action, or our example, might have something to do with using Mike Caulfield's 4 moves and a habit, or it might be based on one-on-one reference appointments, and so on. The theory of action is likely to be far more detailed than we have room for on this slide because it explains your rationale for proceeding in a particular direction. You should feel free to go into as much detail as will be helpful for your work. And as previously stated, the rationale or direction that theory of action will grow in that theory of action will grow and change as you collect and analyze your data. And so here we return to data and to assessment. You can start to see that developing a research theme and a theory of action immediately changes your relationship to the data you collect. First off, it gives you a clearer sense of what data you want to assess and why. Along the same lines, it can point you towards different and better data, and it can also tell you what data you've collected that may not be useful for your purposes. Rather than being overwhelmed by the big picture data we have about student information literacy skills, or finding that we have plenty of data, but that data doesn't answer any of the questions that we want answered, we can use our research theme and theory of action to focus our questions, focus the data we're looking for, and as a result, focus our assessment. To conclude, it's useful to take a step back. We have a research theme with a theory of action, and that gives us a sense of purpose and an overarching goal, and these in turn help us ensure we're focused on getting the right data, so that we can assess the effectiveness of our interventions on student learning. But doesn't this seem obvious? Isn't this just Action Research 101? The short answer is yes, but as is so often the case, an idea being obvious doesn't also make it easy to do. Too often, constraints of time, money, or overall lack of institutional support get in the way. The idea here is to take what may be obvious and bridge the gap to make it attainable. And a research theme can help you do that. Because theoretically, you, alone or with colleagues, could devise a research theme and theory of action in just an hour or two and use it as a guide. It's no substitute for an assessment librarian and a comprehensive plan, but it can go a long way towards focusing your assessment to improve outcomes for your students and your instruction.